All right. Chapter 38 is where we still are. We left off on Wednesday at verse 22. And at this point, you'll recall that Judah had sent his buddy, the Edolamite, to go pay off, Tamar, although he didn't know it was Tamar yet. So verse 22 says, "So he returned to Judah and said, I did not find her. And furthermore, the men of the place said, there's been no temple prostitute here. Then Judah said, let her keep them, lest we become a laughing stock. After all, I sent this kid, but you did not find her." Well, obviously, that kind of tells you right there by Judah's response that the reason he sent his buddy, the Adulamite, is he didn't want it known that he had been visiting prostitutes, and figured best just to keep our mouth shut, because he probably figured at this point, I can get a new staff and a signet ring somewhere else, and I'll just let it ride, because if the town finds out that some prostitute somewhere's got my stuff, well, his fear would be realized, and he didn't want to be found out. Verse 24 says, "Now it was about 3 months later that Judah was informed, your daughter-in-law Tamar has played the harlot, and behold, she is also with child by harlotry." Well, obviously, 3 months later, she's beginning to show a little bit, and at this point, you'll recall, she's still living with her parents, not with Judah. And it's interesting that when Judah is informed of this, there's no indication at all that, she is in any way a part of her original family, even though that's where she's living. They go and tell Judah, and his response is, then Judah said, bring her out and let her be burned. So
they're going to her family's place to seize her and bring her out and kill her.
That's pretty much what he's claiming.
And her family's just gonna let them do that?
Well, unfortunately, that part we don't know.
She still belongs to Judah.
Yeah, see, that's the interesting thing about their culture, is that even though she was living back with her own family, that unless Judah, the father-in-law, releases her, they still consider her the property of Judah and his family. And again, it's not just that, she's the daughter-in-law. They looked at him as just basically one step above being personal property. They didn't have a really good, idea or understanding of the role of women in their culture. But now, even in the law of Moses, what was the penalty for being caught in adultery?
Death.
Death.
Stoning, but for both, not for just one.
Yeah. But see, here the issue is there a law of Moses at this point?
Nope.
There is, the only law that there is their cultural standards. And he wanted to have her brought out and burned to death. Nice guy, I would think, for somebody that was his daughter-in-law. So it was while she was being brought out that she sent to her father-in-law saying, I am with child by the man to whom these things belong. Now, the fact that they say they're bringing her out tells us that, in fact, they did do that. Her parents apparently had no control over it unless they were the ones that ratted her out. That's an entirely possibility, because we're not told who said she was pregnant. It could have been her own family that ratted her out.
They're not taking care of the kid, too.
What's that?
They're not going to take care of the kid, too. She's out doing her own thing. Like
Yeah.
that.
And see, they're not just killing her, they're killing an unborn child.
Yep.
No concept of that at all. So, but this tells us that Tamar was smarter than they thought she was. And this tells us why when he asked, what what are you going to give me for, some collateral till you pay off the debt? And she asked for the signet ring and the staff and stuff that clearly was Judah's. Tells you that she was a smart woman. And she still got this stuff. So when they bring her out to burn her, she's like, well, by the way, I've got this stuff here, and the guy that got me pregnant, this is his stuff. Well, if Judah is as prominent a citizen in this area as we suspect he was, do you think they probably looked at it and immediately recognized who it probably belonged to?
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, you know that they knew it was Judah's. Says, she said, please examine and see. Whose signet ring and cords and staff are these? Well, they would have known. And Judah recognized them and said, she is more righteous than I, inasmuch as I did not give her to my son Shelah, and he did not have relations with her again. So two things happened here. Now notice, first off, while he's demanding that she be burned, when he's confronted with the truth of the situation, that, by the way, you're the one that got her pregnant, he declares that, well, I guess she's, more righteous than I am. Why would Judah have said this?
The jig is up.
Well, not only that, but what this tells us, that since they thought she had basically been a prostitute and had gotten pregnant this way, and then Judah claims, well, she's more righteous than I am, what does that tell you about their value of this concept of levirate marriage? Judah recognized at this point that his obligation to have provided his daughter-in-law to his next son, since Shelah, the youngest of the three, was now old enough to get married and apparently wasn't yet married, that was a more important cultural and legal issue than what she was being accused of. And Judah immediately figured at this point, well, I've been caught.
I've been thinking a lot the last few days about why he did what he did to her. And he didn't know that God killed his first son because his first son was evil. God didn't reveal that to him. He didn't know that God killed his second son because he was disobedient. All he saw was that he tried to marry two sons to this woman and they both died. So from his perspective, he saw this woman as being somehow cursed. And he was worried that he marries his third son to her, he's going to die.
That's exactly what it tells us. That his motivation for not allowing her to marry his third son was that, in fact, he thought the same thing would happen to him. But it was a violation of God's law. God said that, God is concerned with preserving the messianic line. And at this point, Judah is, in fact, the chosen one to preserve that line. Judah's got three sons. First two are dead. He's not allowing his third one to get married and produce an heir. So now Tamar tricks him into producing, as we'll see here in a minute, two more. So ultimately Judah did have 5 sons. And by the way, we're not told after this what happened to the third son. We don't know. We can assume he might have gotten married at some point, but not the one that ended up passing on the messianic line. But it says he did not have relations with her again. Well, why not?
I don't think it would have been legal for him.
Yeah, it was his daughter-in-law. And he knew that. She tricked him into having sex with her to begin with. And now that he's owned up to this and he realizes, well, no matter what, I may have been the one to get her pregnant, but, it would not be right for him to have taken her as a wife. And of course, now he's definitely not going to give her to his third son because now she's pregnant with his baby. Which, of course, at this point I say baby because they didn't know yet she had twins.
Well, okay, so
if she's pregnant with his children, even though it's his daughter-in-law, isn't there kind of still a point at which it's like, well, she's carrying his kids?
Yeah, aren't those kids don't become his legal heirs?
No,
Or
they
do
would have been his legal heirs because
But how could they be if she wasn't his wife?
well,
It would be
because
because of the son.
legally, who's first off, the whole point of what she's trying to force him to do is to honor his obligation for leveratic marriage,
But he doesn't. He doesn't.
which he
end up doing
didn't do that.
and he still doesn't do it.
Right, but the point is that had he done that, any child, the firstborn male child, regardless if it's from his family, who would be the legal heir? Or I should say the legal, father of it, again, not biologically,
The
but
first son
legally,
or the second son.
would have been the first son.
So the second son doesn't count at all anymore.
Nope.
Okay, he lost out.
So it would have been the legal heir of the first son. But then who's the first son the legal heir of? Judah. So it's still his heir, whether legally or not, plus biologically. Well, legally it's these two kids that are born are his grandsons, but biologically they're his two sons. So any way you look at it, Judah's on the hook. And of course now he's definitely not going to have her burned because he realizes, well, my baby she's carrying. Of course, he would have been baby because they didn't know she had twins yet. All right, verse 27. It came about at the time she was giving birth that, behold, there were twins in her womb. Moreover, it took place while she was giving birth. One put out a hand, and the midwife took and tied a scarlet thread on his hand, saying, this one came out first. But now notice at this point, the only thing that has been born, if you can even call it that, is just this child's hand. It said, it came about, this verse 29, came about as he drew back his hand, that behold, his brother came out. So, now, with that being the case, maybe you twin ladies in here might have some insight on this. If you've got two children basically almost being born simultaneously, what does that tell you?
The mother's in dire pain.
Well, okay.
Okay, other than that.
I wasn't quite going that way. What kind of twins are you two?
Identical.
Bingo. There you go. They were not fraternal twins because fraternal twins have each got their own amniotic sac and in fact, it's known for a fact, as you two may very well know, sometimes there can be, several minutes to quite a bit of time difference between the birth of the first and the second when they're fraternal twins.
15.
15 minutes?
Yep.
But when they're identical twins, what happens? They're both in the same amniotic sac and both of them will basically be born one right after the other. The fact that you've got one with his arm out and clearly in physical contact with his brother, as Bruce just said, that tells us they were identical twins.
Well, one had a bracelet.
Merrill, go deal with that man. All right. Then she said, what a breach you've made for yourself, which makes me wonder, and I've actually looked this up, and no commentator will tackle this at all. There's no mention of it, but for her to say that makes you wonder, was he a breech birth?
Yeah.
Says, what a breach you've made for yourself. So he named him Perez, which of course means breach. And afterward, his brother, who had the scarlet thread on his hand, and his name was Zerah, which means dawning or brightness. Now, guess which one becomes the next in the Messianic line? Perez. Yep. Identical twins here, folks. I bet Judah was not expecting that.
The whole thing was a surprise.
Yeah,
I just wanted to have some fun. That's what Judah's thinking.
probably. But,
That was a long trip to go shear the sheep.
yeah. Now, what's this an example of, you might ask? Why is this even in here? Now, is what Tamar did, was it sinful or honest?
Sinful.
Of course it was sinful. Now, what Judah did, was it sinful or honest?
Sinful.
Sinful. In fact, he thought he was having sex with a prostitute.
No
But-
way.
What you see here is an example where even though the intent on the part of both people involved was sinful, whose will got accomplished?
The Lord God Almighty.
God still had his way regardless. So when we think we're doing wrong, and we may be doing wrong, guess what? God still gets the last word in.
All things work together.
And this is a good example of that, where no matter what, God will have his way, one way or the other. Questions this evening?
Just kind of a comment, really. It's just, the people that were around Judah and that they were associating with did not seem to be an immoral people. I mean, the fact that, you know, the way they treated Tamar and stuff like that.
Mhm.
But later on, the whole civilization is so bad, God wants them totally destroyed. So something happened between now and when the Jews come back. That was pretty significant.
Well, you've also got better than 400 years worth of time that went by.
Yeah.
And we all know that how much time does it take for a culture to go bad? One generation.
See that right?
Yeah, we're seeing that in our own nation right now. So here you had 400 years worth of time, and a lot of the people that lived in Canaan at that time were already pagans. We can see that not all of them were, but there were a lot of them, and I think over that 400-year period, those that were godly people just died out, and knowledge of the true God just died out with them because they didn't do what they should have done, which was to teach the next generation. I think the greatest obligation we have as Christians is not just to share the gospel with those around us, but to always be sure we teach the next generation. And I think that's exactly what we're seeing going on in our nation now, is we've had 2 or 3 generations in a row where we didn't teach our kids about Jesus. And we're paying the price for it.
It's hard when the schools and everything are against you too.
Mm-hmm. And even when you teach your kids about Jesus, once they move out,
Yeah.
you know,
World ain't
we have no control over it. Anyway, anybody else? Mario,
Yes.
all yours.